Awesome. Well, I've got Andre and Sharon here, some awesome intermediate and high school teachers with us. I want to say thank you for taking time out of your school holidays to spend some time with us chatting about online school. How about introduce yourself and what level or subjects that you are teaching at?
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Andre Loubser. I teach at Elam Christian College. Now we've got multiple sites, and on the site that I'm at, we've got actually two areas. We've got the junior years area from year 1 to 6, and then we've got the middle years area from year 7 to 10. I am a co-lead or assistant lead for the middle years area, and I also teach digital technology. I have been at the school for 21 years, and so I've been growing up with the school.
That's awesome.
Cool. Hi, I'm Sharon. I teach at Botany Downs Secondary College. I've been there for 10 years now, and I am a whānau leader. So basically, we've got 6 whānau across the school, and I lead one of those, so about 320-ish or so kids that I'm involved in the pastoral care for, and obviously a group of teachers and leading those. So I teach maths, and across the secondary ages this year I've got 2 year 9 classes, a year 11 and a year 13 calculus class.
Fantastic. And also another fun fact is that you are both parents of teenagers, which is an added bonus for our interview today. So my daughter is in year 11 at Pat College, Form 5 for those that are old school. She is doing her online school completely independently. They send out the Google Classroom stuff, and she chooses when she does it and stuff. A couple of times she's come out and she's gone, I'm really struggling with quadratic equations. And I'm like, let's wait till your dad gets home. I am so not helpful on that side. She's done a number of her derived grade exams already online. I always feel like I should print out a little sign that says quiet exams in progress. But it's pretty much independent, self-motivated, self-determined learning. What are you finding some of the big challenges are for our students in high school and intermediate at the moment?
I'll go first. I think because of what you just said is that she probably goes into a room and then she flicks on her device and does what she needs to do, and then she switches it off and she comes out. Normally the learning would have happened in a classroom where there were 25 or 28 other students in the class with a teacher, sometimes a learning assistant or teacher aide, and the dynamics would have changed radically. So for what I've seen and in the conversations that I've had is that some students really love the isolation because they're wired to be working alone. They like the quiet, they like the fact that they can manage their own times and how they invest their time and how they invest their downtime. So social isolation, I think, is one of the big things that have come up that I've seen in my house, but also in conversation with parents. But the other side of that coin as well is once they've done their work, or if they actually did some work, sometimes they go into the social media side of things and they get the social media overload. I've just coined that phrase, I suppose.
Good phrase.
Yeah, and I think for me, the issue here at the moment is that in terms of social interaction, there's kind of extremes. And of course, being on a spectrum, there will be some kids in the middle that kind of have a good balance because they would have been the students at school that would have been the balanced students, or the work way of working would have be suited to that type of environment where they can manage themselves, but they can also socialize and they can manage their time. So I think social connectedness for students is one of the big things. I live out close to Pukekohe, and I know we're in a little township there's not much happening here, and for my kids, they're really struggling being disconnected with their friends. And the only way to get back into that connection is through social media. And if they don't manage that well, it becomes overload. Sharon.
Yeah, certainly I've seen some of that, and probably I guess there's a wide range of different experiences, and you're going to have some kids who are loving it and those who are hating it. Just talking to Nathan about it, he said for him, his biggest challenge has been the distraction, because you're on a device all the time, the distraction of other stuff that's not school stuff. And I guess particularly for him as a teenage boy, what's the point is a very big question that he is asking. I mean, what's the point of me actually doing this? What's the point? And particularly because I think, you know, as educators, we've been thrown into this online learning situation without much time to actually really sit down, reflect, and actually have some way of developing stuff that actually what works online and what works in a classroom are quite different things, and where you're trying to have to adapt almost at a moment's notice. And we're certainly learning in the process. Certainly for me, you know, what things have worked and things haven't worked, and you know, so what's going to work for the kids as well is going to be a bit hit and miss sometimes. But I think you know, everyone's just trying their best. And I think that's, you know, you've got to go with that. What is the best that we can do at this point in time? And for every student, that's going to look different. For every teacher, that's going to look a bit different. And, you know, there's got to be a little bit of grace that's given around that. And, you know, while there might not be some of the formal learning taking place, there's a lot of other skills, and we'll talk about that a bit more later, but, you know, learning other skills, which I think is really important. Just in talking to some of my other students, a little bit of anxiety around future exams. I guess also just the fact that we don't know when we're coming out of the lockdown, just timings of things, particularly as we're heading towards NCA exams and kids getting ready for university and all that sort of thing. So yes, acknowledging that little bit of anxiety around that. And I guess also just the last point I wanted to raise is that around some of the home situations, you know, for us as, you know, Christian families, it's, you know, you kind of go, we've got some great tools we can use, and, you know, but for other families who don't actually believe in God and don't have a belief system around which the home situation can actually be quite challenging. And I know I've had students who've mentioned that to me during the lockdown. So, you know, you talk about just in a broader picture as to, you know, some of the challenges they're facing. That for me was kind of some of the key things that came out.
Yeah, because I think if they're happy in themselves, then they're more resilient to roll with the challenges and to be more adaptable to things and to find their rhythm. But if they are anxious or things at home aren't settled, then, you know, that can really, really affect them. So as a teacher, what do you want the students to take away from this experience?
I think you just touched on that one, Claire, in terms that for my one, I put at the top of the list, there was resilience. You know, life's going to throw you challenges in workplaces and social settings in all sorts of different forms. And this is just one of the life challenges that they're actually living through and growing through that by actually facing, yes, they're at school, but I think that was one of the key things for me I would like to see them as just growing around that area of resilience and being able to manage themselves during something that's not as easy as it would normally have been.
Often those skills they learn, you know, in their 20s when they're at uni or they go to work, but it's like, you know, they're on advanced learning.
Yeah. I think also the next one I put up there is that just around the well-being aspect and how to manage your own well-being. And that for me would be something that I would like to your students to come away with this, is that, ability, and obviously parents helping to coach through that, teachers helping to coach them through that, but how to manage your well-being. And I'll talk a little bit more perhaps about that a bit later with strategies when we talk about as parents. But I think also for me as a teacher, I would like them to feel listened to, and actually being able to, like, a bit of a two-way process in the online learning. It's not just us giving them stuff. In a classroom, we would be engaging and actually getting some feedback from students, and I've been working quite hard to try and keep that relationship with the students up and get that feedback, which I must admit is a lot more challenging when it's online, but still really working quite hard to do that. So, students still feeling like they can be listened to and actually have a chance to speak up, give their feedback, and just to give things a go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it must be hard giving that feedback and that relationship stuff when I'd imagine a lot of your Google Classrooms or Zoom calls are a lot of black screens and ceilings.
Yes, it can be.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because, as you know, some teenagers only like to wake up midday. So sometimes I think it is we need to understand that sometimes their clocks and our clocks aren't lined up. So I'm not sure, Sharon, what platform you use. We use Schoology, and for us, some of the infrastructure that's in the system allows us to actually get feedback from them. We have what we call corridors or discussions, and so we have that ongoing conversation that's happening around certain topics in the subject areas, but also when we check in with them, that they can actually message us directly and saying, listen, things at home aren't working, either the Wi-Fi's down or my laptop's crashed or whatever, or I'm just struggling. So we have that open communication. It is available. Not all students use it though, but it is there. And at our school, one of the values that we've recently introduced is courage. And I think courage for me is important because courage means actually making a decision to step out regardless of what you know or what you can see in front of you, and still doing what you think you should do to achieve your best. And I think if our students are able to step up with that sense of courage, that knowing that it's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, it's really going to be a challenge for them academically, socially, emotionally, but they still step up. That's what I would like to see our students do. And that they would, once we come out of lockdown and we're back at school and we've kind of normalized things again, that they can tap themselves on the shoulder and say, well done. And we can look at it and also say, hey, well done. You kind of pushed through. We know it was hard. We know your situation, but we know that you actually achieved something that we can't grade on a piece of paper, but we can see you matured. You've picked up some skills. And talking about skills, one of the things that we've been pushing through on hard at our school is typing skills for students to be able to be touch typists, because the keyboard is actually kind of the front door to all our learning. Yes, you can now use speech to text technology to get words on a piece of on a page, but if you want to take notes, you can't talk while the other person's talking, so you need to be able to take notes. And so one of the things that we've set up is an application called typing.com. It's a free application. There's a myriad of them. You just say free typing and it comes up. And I encourage all my students, and when we interviewed for students for next year as well, we encourage them, while you've got the time, get the skill of touch typing, because it's going to open up and give you some flexibility in doing your homework, or taking notes, or writing your essays and stuff. So the skills is important, and even skills at home. If your child didn't manage keeping their room clean, maybe now is the time to kind of help them with things like that, or learning new skills in terms of baking. Or my one daughter is really creative, and she started making clothes, and so quite high-end kind of products, or difficulty level products, or outcome material, and so she's learning a lot of new skills that she wouldn't have necessarily learned at school. So, you know, as a parent looking at that and saying, "Hey, well done, honey, you've done really well." Although I know that you're having a difficult time with getting some of the schoolwork done because you're all alone, you don't have your support system around you, you're still doing well. And when we pop out of lockdown, maybe acknowledging that still and say, "Hey, oh, you've got that outfit on, that's amazing," you know, and kind of reflecting back and saying, "Hey, it was a tough time, but look what you've done," you know. So those skills of actually reflecting back on themselves and the things that they've done is quite important. I listened to a webinar the other day, and they spoke with teenagers, and the one thing that they said is, yes, you can keep asking us, "How are you doing?" but that's not helping us. So rather ask us, "What have you learned? What successes can you point to? What challenges have you overcome?" Because that is something I can tick a box for, because some days I'm feeling good, sometimes I'm feeling bad. So I feel stressed if I have to give you an answer that makes you happy, mum or dad. So for parents, I would say just keep encouraging them, allow them some off days, because we all have off days. And if they get into that rhythm and they hit that one day that they're doing really well, just, you know, acknowledge that, give them the credit for that, and work on that. I just thought about kind of going one step back. We spoke about what the kids are experiencing, and I thought talking about neurodiverse students that are not your normal middle of the road student, right? So we're all on the spectrum somewhere, and some of us work in a certain way. Our brains are wired in a certain way, and for some others it's wired differently. And I think if we acknowledge that when the child is having a problem or struggling with the math or that social emotional side of things, to say, "Honey, you're wired like that, and it's okay to be that person that's struggling with that one thing," and to just support them through that. I think if they feel a judgment or criticism around, "Why aren't you just like that child that is always happy and succeeding," and so on, it just closes that door for them to be able to breathe and be okay with themselves and still plod on with what they need to do.
That's some really great advice there. That's awesome. I know that you mentioned like these distractions and motivation, and, you know, kids having a lovely long sleep in and, you know, rocking up in their PJs and that. What are some strategies that they can use to stay focused and motivated on their school stuff when there's so much else going on and so many other things vying for their attention?
Sharon.
I think coming back to the one thing I spoke about was getting them to see the value in what they're doing. I think that's probably number one for us. I particularly have noticed it with Nathan as a young man, but potentially also for the girls as well. But that for him is like, what is in it for me? I need to know the purpose of why I'm actually doing this, for me to have any sense of achievement of actually going through. So I think, you know, that for me has been some of the conversations that we've had around stuff he hasn't wanted to really do. Is like, why do I need to do this? And actually talking through and actually getting him to see the points around what's the actual value in doing that, and unpacking that a little bit. So yeah, that for us has been one of the key things. Second thing I wanted to mention was around the importance of routines, and just talking about that with a few other teachers and parents and stuff, and having, I know you like to say the teenagers like to sleep in and stuff, but actually I think the way our brains are wired is that it actually functions better when there is a routine, and actually we get up at this time, this is what we do, etc. And actually working through and using those routines can actually help them to stay on track and help them to stay motivated to actually, this is what's happening when. And then, yes, you will have your periods of downtime. Your downtime is here, and you can choose what you want to do during that downtime, and those are really important. But just that sense of routine, I think, is quite important. And then the last one that I wrote down for that is just to keeping the channels of communication open between not just you as parent and child, but also between, you know, kids and their friends and kids and their teachers and stuff, and just encouraging those. And for them, and I've certainly noticed for Nathan that that's helped, one of the main things that's helped him to stay motivated and on track.
I wrote down that managing the diary, I think, is quite important, because what happens is that the learning management system that we use is similar to a Facebook, and the teacher would post something, and then another teacher would post something else, and it's like a live feed that comes through. And one of the downsides of that is that you kind of miss some of the things. But the benefit of our system is that it's actually got a built-in diary. So if there's a task that the teacher's given and it's got a due date, that populates into the diary. And so often the kids miss it because they're just looking at the feed and don't look at the diary, or the calendar rather. And so what we've kind of been pushing for the last while is that parents sit with a child and say, hey, okay, let's look at your diary. Let's look at your calendar and see what's coming up next. What do you have to work on today to be ready for tomorrow? And what can you work on tomorrow for the day after? And so on. So they can manage their time a little bit better and not feel the pressure of doing nothing for 3 days and then suddenly on the 4th day having to do 3 days worth of work in 1 day for the 5th day. And so that's how we're trying to stretch out the workload for our students so that they can then hit the marks on when they have to have handed stuff in. And by virtue of how the system works is that it's all time stamped. And if the task is due by 3 p.m. today and they only do it at 3:05, then they get a late against the mark against the assignment. And it might be a perfect assignment. If they don't manage themselves well, it can be a problem. And the resources that each family has is so diverse that you need to kind of think about it, because where there's maybe one computer or the network is not very strong, the internet is not very strong, and you've got multiple computers on one, you might be ready and want to upload, but the network, the Wi-Fi is not, so you need to be preempting all of those things. So I think if you manage that part a little bit, then it takes a lot of pressure off. It opens up lines of communication because you have to negotiate when you're going to do things. And hopefully that'll support the student in actually learning how to manage themselves as a young adult, going to university, or as a tradesperson, or going to the military maybe, and be successful there.
Some really valuable life skills there. So yeah, I was going to add one thing if I can, Claire. I just actually wrote it down at the bottom, is around the element of fun. And I think where you can add some fun into stuff, it certainly helps to add to the motivation levels. And, you know, I know what fun looks like for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's the same for the other, but just a range of different strategies, and, you know, where it can be a bit of humor and a bit of, you know, something that's a bit lighthearted and that sort of stuff. I think I think sometimes it can just all get too intense, too sort of like narrowly focused, and just that element of fun as often as you can, just whether it's a joke or whether it's something that's in, whether it's our face-to-face lessons or part of the fun things. It's just, you know, just trying different strategies to introduce a bit of the fun side of things just to help. And I think that does help a bit with the motivation.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that. That's very cool. So moving on, as parents, and you can answer as a teacher or a parent here, get swap hats. How can we best support our young people?
Well, first of all, I'll feed them.
Good plan.
It is. We've been a lot on a journey, and as a parent, I take my hat off to other parents. I've got a teaching background, so we've got some strategies in place. But I would suggest that first of all, that parents take a step back and say, this is a unique situation. I don't have to be a parent and a fully qualified teacher with 20 years of experience. I can be the mum that just tries to get my kids to sit at the dining table and look at one task at a time. And just if they just do one small step, I would say that is it.
So you're saying I don't need to know how to do quadratic equations?
Not at all. And I tell you what, there are so many online resources available for our students, and sometimes if the teacher hasn't told them, hey, you can actually look at a Khan Academy or some other places where they will actually go through the steps with you like I would have if I was sitting next to you. You can go over that again and rewind and again and rewind and again until you get it, because some students work like that. Others would watch the video once and they know exactly what to do in something like quadratic equations. And then maybe just also trying to find another parent that might be in the same boat. So just as for, I'm talking more about the parents now, but so that you can actually vent your frustrations or your fears to another parent in a safe space, and then come back having learned hopefully something from the other parent, and then trying it in your home. Because what happens is that it becomes like a little dance. The child says, I don't understand anything. And you go, oh, I have to know everything to explain everything so that they can understand anything. And their fear, or maybe a little bit of laziness sometimes, becomes your problem. And as a parent, you kind of then trying to accommodate for that and still do your job and still cook meals and do the washing and take the dog for a walk. So I think if we up as parents, if we can say, okay, let's take a big thing and break it down into smaller chunks and just focus on having small successes, then the big successes will fall in place, as opposed to looking at this big massive thing and feeling a failure with every step we take. And that'll apply for students as well. I would say that if they were to break down the big thing into small chunks, if you have to write an essay, you can't just sit down and start writing an essay. You have to plan it somewhere. So that planning process is chunking it into smaller bits and then thinking about the bits, see how it fits together, and then start working, fluffing it out to make it work. And so I try to say to my students, just do what you have to do and follow the pattern or the plan, or create a plan so that you can follow that. Because often kids are so used to being spoon-fed by sometimes teachers, sometimes parents, that they just sit there waiting for things to happen. So my advice would be, hey, why don't you tell me 3 steps that you could do, step 1, step 2, step 3, and let's try that and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, let's try something else. So now you're giving them planning strategies, checking whether the strategies have worked, and review, or self-review. And then if the strategy didn't work, they then do a plan B. So those are all skills that as adults we have to do, because if you planted a veggie garden and you never watered it, you need to re-strategize and put a watering system in. So at the end of the day, I think that would be my support for my young person, is to say, don't look at the big thing, break it down to the small things and chop away at it, at small things one at a time. One thing that I did write down was from that webinar I listened to, they said, work to time and not to task. Because if you've got an essay that you have to write, let's say 1,000-word essay, and you sit down and you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you, that's daunting. But if you say, okay, I'm going to take a 20-minute block, I'm just going to brainstorm all the ideas I have, and I'll stop. go away, have my morning tea, come back, and then spend another 20 minutes on refining, and then having another quick break, and so on. So that, I would say, would be to alleviate that constant pressure. So you come back, you have a little bit of pressure, you optimize your performance, and then when you're tired or you're exhausted your creative juices, then you step away for a bit.
Fantastic. How about for you, Sharon? What are some ways that we as parents can support our young people?
A lot of what I wrote down was around supporting them with their well-being. So just, yeah, that was a key thing I wanted to perhaps speak into. We had a chat with Nathan Wallace at the start of this year. Now, he's a guy who does some stuff with neuroscience. And a lot of what he said was really, really interesting. And part of it is kind of what I'm drawing on with this. So I think the first thing I wanted to is, obviously we've got to recognize that we're spending a lot more time together than we were previously. So you kind of just, in the lockdown, you are together 24/7. And yes, you can take your breaks, but we're kind of forced into this time, and that can create different tensions that we weren't dealing with before. So I think just for me, what I felt, is as parents, where are the kind of the rock in our families and what's holding it together. So I think it's about us checking in with our own well-being first, and just making sure that that is actually functioning. And you kind of touched a bit on this, Andre, as well, with having another parent or people that you can actually go to and have a vent or have a conversation. What would you do about this? But actually you're bringing that then back into, so that our well-being is actually a place, because kids can pick up when we're not in a great space, and actually then can almost create a cycle of something that's not super healthy. So that for me would be my first tip, is just make sure we're in a, and if we're not in a good space, kind of acknowledging that, but doing what we need to do to get back into that space that is perhaps a bit more positive.
And that's really good modeling as well, to show them, I'm looking after my well-being, this is what I'm doing. If I'm not in a great space, to get in a great space, so that they can then learn from that.
Yeah, totally. So I think one of the things that I learned from Nathan Wallace, which was super helpful, was around the idea of validating. Now, I'm just going to actually read to you the definition of it. It's basically hearing a child's emotion and reflecting it back to them. And I'll go into a little bit more detail through those, but something that I've been trying to learn to do, because it is a skill and it's not something that often comes very naturally, but it's really, really helpful. And yeah, it's been one of my things I've been trying to work on during this year. So I guess one of the key aspects of it is around being present in your conversations. And it also means we're noticing how our kids are responding to things that are going on. So whether it's something that's a bit more out of character for them, whether they are withdrawing or communicating less, and then to kind of ask them a question. It's like, hey, I couldn't help noticing your face looked a bit sad when I saw you a couple of hours ago. Haven't seen you since. How is it going? And it's kind of leaving it open, so it's not forcing them into a response, and then they could just give you the thing going, fine. And it's not kind of going, it does create a space, but if they don't want to take it, that's obviously the other side of it. But allowing them to choose how much they actually feed back to you. And I think that the key thing on this one is allowing them to share at their own pace, which for us is quite a tough thing to do, I think, as a parent, because you really want to, I guess we get into this thing, we want to fix it. I can see you not in a great space. We want to fix it for them. And that, is learning how to take that step back and getting them, you're talking a bit about that as well, Andre, is teaching them how they can start to fix things and how they can start to address them. So I think for me it was allowing the kids to give a chance to express their voice. And the message, I think, particularly when it's busy and you're kind of going, that they've got deadlines and things, you need to get this done, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you actually hear your language in it. There's a lot of pressure that's created by you need to. And it's just sometimes kind of backing away from that and just allowing them to have that bit of space to process sometimes. So perhaps I can just finishing off in terms of some of the statements that help around the validation. So for me, what I've learned is that it's been around how can I change my behavior rather than expecting my teenager to change his behavior. And it's really, really hard to do. And it's not an easy journey to go on, but I think it's been quite helpful. So things like, I can see how you would feel that way. That must be really hard. I feel the same way, or I bet you're frustrated with that. And then just giving the space for those rather than going, you need to think about how lucky you are, or you're too sensitive, harden up, or whatever, kind of those statements. I think we all know, but it's so easy to swing into those rather than if they're very angry, you seem very angry. Is that what's going on? And giving them that space to talk about it. And then once they actually feel validated, almost 90% of the time, the problem almost fixes itself. And you might have to have some more conversations once they actually allow you to do that, and it just opens up the communication. But I think for me the key thing with this one, coming back to your question, was how can we support our young people? That for me, that learning how to validate the emotions and having those kind of conversations and watching how I phrase my questions back has been a really key thing, I think.
So, and I think taking away the pressure of you should do it like this, or you should get up at 9 and do it, and just saying, well, what's working for you and how are you making it work, and creating that space for the conversation. You're saying, oh, I can see you're looking really sad. They might not talk to you then, but maybe a bit later, there's that openness there. It's fantastic and really wise. I love Nathan Wallace. He's amazing. So last question here. So many people are focusing on all the things that our young people are missing. They're missing their ball, they're missing their end of year prize givings, all that fun social aspect of school and tutor classes and all the elements that come with it. And what are some of the skills and things that they are gaining though through this experience?
Well, I think, we've discussed a little bit before, is that life isn't a bed of roses necessarily, and there's no manual that said it has to be like that. So I think if they learn that sometimes things don't go our way, and it is okay, we can go through it and look back. Yes, we can look back and go, wow, I've been through this, but look how amazing it is, the place I'm in now. I'm so grateful for this, that, and the next thing because of that. That is quite helpful. I know it's difficult when you're right in the middle of it, but I think if we can point our students to the ability to just hang on for a bit longer and to push through, that they'll be able to see, like Sharon said, what is it in it for me, that they'll then see, or we can point it into the idea that they would have grown in understanding of themselves, of their friendships, the relationships with the teachers, with their parents, and that they would have moved on because of this experience, and that we've had a few friends have birthdays during the lockdown, and I keep saying we have to have revenge parties to make up for those missed parties and so on. And so maybe we can create a little bit of a hope by saying, yes, your party didn't happen because we're in lockdown, but we're going to have a revenge party, or we're going to have a makeup party, and we're going to invite the people that we can for that level, and we're going to make sure that it is one of the most epic parties that you've ever had, and maybe some quirky things, as opposed to just the regular stuff. I think if we kind of create a little bit of hope, as opposed to just look at the doom and gloom of, I have to wear a mask and I have to sanitize my hands and I can't go to my friends, and if you just keep focusing on, I've lost the ability to go to the ball this year, or I've planned this dress for 3 years already and I can't wear it, whatever the case might be. If we can reinstate a little bit of hope, that'll take them through, I believe, to maybe a next year where they might be able to experience some of these things that we're missing.
Yeah, I think just around the idea of resilience, and I guess this is definitely in times like, how can I actually build my resilience and my ability to face tough situations. And the second one is around self-management. I think that's, there are a lot of skills that are actually being learned, which if you actually go and do a Google search for what are the skills that employers look for, those two are some of the top ones. That, and probably the third one, if I can pop in there, is good communication. And those three things are some of the really, really key career skills that are going to be important for life. So it's not just about the content that they're learning, it's about the life skills and other things that they're gaining through it too. So I think, those are skills that you're going to pick up just by living through it, and just by doing, rather than having to be put into another situation to learn this. So I think that could be some of the key things that they're gaining through this time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think this generation, they're a remarkable bunch of young people, and I just think that this generation's amazing, and it's going to be cool to see what happens and who they grow up and become, and who they are becoming. Well, I want to thank you guys for your wisdom and your grace and your encouragement to our young people and to our families at the river. I really appreciate your time and who you are. So thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.